I have the longest name in the world. No one can pronounce it. Hello, everyone. My name is Barnaby Usansky. Or rather, not exactly. My name is much, much longer. It consists of 29 words. Previously consisted of 28, but everything in order. I was born in a simple family. My parents christened me Jan. Jan is a simple two-letter name. To be honest, I never liked the name. I didn't think it should belong to me. Do you ever feel that way? I grew up with this name, experiencing discomfort. When I turned 16, I thought about changing it, but my father was against it. When he heard about this idea, he was very indignant, but even more angry when he found out what name I want to change it to. The fact is that my name consisted of all my favorite words. I was very interested in history, old words, and names, and decided to use all the ones I love. Dad said I was an idiot and told me to do more serious things. Of course, I was upset. Why is my choice considered stupid just because it doesn't fit into the standard framework? I asked my mother for help. She was not against it, but she could not go against my father. So she took a neutral position. So I was still Jan. The mood deteriorated day by day. I felt like life was slipping through my fingers and I couldn't do anything. How humiliating it was to feel that you were strangling your own name. And one terrible rainy day, I went out for a walk and sat in my favorite cafe. I drank my coffee and thought about my beautiful new name. Suddenly, my friend came up to me. We were in the same class years ago. Lily was always with me. It turns out that she graduated from law school and now works as a successful lawyer. I was happy for her. We had a nice chat, and in the end, she told me to ask her for help. Without hesitation, I immediately asked if I could legally change my name, and she said yes. Oh my God! This cherished yes became a springboard for me to fulfill my dream. I couldn't believe my desire was real. I just need to talk to my father. A couple of days later, I steeled myself and went into Dad's office. As always, he was leafing through the newspaper, reading the news. He liked to keep up to date. Oh, you know, son, it turns out our neighbor from Brooklyn built a statue of himself and put it in the yard of his house. Says thus wants to perpetuate itself. Not bad, I mean the idea of perpetuation, Dad said, laughing. I told him I wanted to do the same. But how will you make a statue of yourself? Where should we put it? We live in an apartment, Dad said. But I corrected him. No, Dad, perpetuate yourself with a name. I came up with the perfect name for myself. It will combine all my favorite words and meanings. You see, I will feel more confident with him, I said. My father frowned again. He reminded me once again that my name was given to me by my grandfather, that is, my father, and it would not be nice if I renounced it. Our conversation was again deadlocked, but I had no intention of backing down. Dad, you know if I liked my name, I wouldn't be cranky. Besides, with my new name, I will become popular, and it will help you in business. After all, journalists will be required to take an interview with you. Maybe your business will be ruined, I blurted out. I was very worried about that conversation. I thought if I didn't win now, I would never win. My father was silent. He stared at a single point and just stared at her in silence. All right, he said suddenly. What? I repeated, not believing my ears. Was my father really okay with it? All my attempts were not in vain? I couldn't believe my luck. Oh, Father, thank you very much. Thank you, I shouted, and started to hug. But my father said that I would be responsible for the consequences myself. According to the law in our country, my name can only be used once. I agreed to everything. I immediately called my lawyer friend Lily. She advised me and told me what documents and where to submit. I did everything in about 4 days. Then I had to wait. A month later, I became a new person with a new name. Now my name was Barnaby, Aloysius, Benji, Kobweb, D'Artagnan, Egbert, Felix, Gaspar, Humbert, Ignatius, Jaden, Casper, Leroy, Maximilian, Nettie, Obajalu, Pepin, Quilliam, Rosenkrantz, Sexton, Teddy, Upwood, Jivatma, Wayland, Casillan, Yardley, Zachary, Usansky. Exactly 28 words. Oh, how happy I was. I rushed home with the new documents with a sense of renewal. I felt like I had turned a mountain. I kissed my parents and showed them my name. And then, as I expected, journalists came to our house. They began to interview us, including my father. Everyone was interested in what prompted me to choose these words. I was happy to answer, because I was proud of my name. 6 months later, my fame spread all over the world. I was very happy. Everyone asked me what I would call my son when I got married. I'd like to call it Marmaduke. This word should have been my 29th, but I saved it specifically for my descendant. And now you will think that I approached this issue lightly. But I really did not take into account some points. The thing is, when I started living my normal life again, I had some difficulties. Getting documents for a special order because of the long name was not the biggest problem. When I wanted to travel, when I filled out the visa application form, I went into shock. But I was obliged to specify the full name. I was lost and didn't know what to do. The visa was not made to order because everything had to be according to international standards. When I opened a bank account, I made one mistake in my name when filling out the contract and I almost lost my own money. In addition, when I took over my dad's car, because of my name again, there were difficulties and I had to run with the documents for 2 weeks to settle the problems. In general, as something that already didn't bring me joy. Didn't I tell you that I can only legally change my name once? I didn't tell anyone about it, especially my father. I just silently struggled with the difficulties I had created for myself. And now there is no going back. But I am sure that when I have children, I will call them by the same name.
I hate my awful name. Hi, my name is Rena. Not so long ago, I changed my first and last name, and all because I did not like it and caused a lot of problems. People avoided me because they were ashamed and embarrassed to be around a man by the name of Perkosrek. I'm sure you'll laugh too, but there was a tradition in my family that was stupid, but it was maintained for many generations. There was no way to break it. I was born in a family where the names of born children are chosen by their grandparents on the father's side. It was something like an expression of honor and respect. If the baby's father or mother didn't like the name, nothing changed. The elders had the last word. It doesn't matter if the child's parents like it or not. And in my situation, it was a little worse because my grandfather was very fond of space and rockets. This was the generation of the Soviet Union, and I probably don't need to tell you how fanatical our old people were. So when I was born, I was named Perkosrek. Perkosrek is the first space rocket. That is, this is the ideal name, according to the grandfather, for the first granddaughter. Changing his name was disrespectful to grandfather, so he was terribly conservative, so the word of the elders should have been law, the execution of which required discipline and unquestioning. Well, when I was a kid, I didn't really care. I thought it was a perfectly normal name, and there was nothing funny about it. My mother always called me Perry. When I went to kindergarten, everything was normal, although the teacher called me Perry as my mother. I found out later that it was all at my mother's request. At school, this trick did not work, as lists of class names were hung on the board for everyone to see. Oh, I'll never forget my 1st of September. I was already on the edge with excitement, so there's also my name. After the welcome line, all the students went to the classes to get acquainted with each other and with the class teacher. The teacher read the name in the magazine. At this moment, the student got up and told something about himself. Boris Perkosrek. Perdosa Perkosrek. Sorry for my inattention, the teacher said, barely suppressing a smile. I got up as expected and saw the whole class laughing loudly at me. Someone was pointing and taking pictures on the phone. The boys immediately began to imitate, call fart or shit. I couldn't help it. I just stood there and watched the others laugh at me. It was a terrible moment of shame. I hated my name. I ran out of the classroom, leaving my backpack behind. Then I quickly found a more or less hidden place in the basement of the school to hide there. I was sobbing. My first meeting, so many new guys, and I was the laughing stock before I even opened my mouth. Anyway, I didn't go back to class that day. I ran home in a bad mood and very angry. My mother was worried and asked what happened. I couldn't say a word because I was so hysterical. They were laughing at me. I hate my name. My mother took a deep breath, hugged me, and sat down on the sofa. It was to be expected, she said. I couldn't believe she knew I was going to be like this. I was angry with her, saying, why did she allow this to happen to me? Why did they ruin my life? My mother apologized, saying that she had no other choice. Your grandfather, as you know, was very fanatical about space and rockets. He worked as an engineer building these very rockets. He was dedicated to his work, but he was fired because of old age. But the love remained, and then when you were born, he didn't hesitate to call you what he called you. Your father didn't dare say a word against his father, my mother said. Further, according to her, when I learned that her first daughter would be called Perkosrak, my mother was hysterical, not less than I am today. She tried to persuade my father to talk carefully with my grandfather, but nothing happened. There were only continuous scandals, and my mother temporarily delayed with problems, coming up with my abbreviated name, Perry. Then my mother asked me to be strong and persistent, and she promised to try to solve my problem. You'd know how much I didn't want to go back to school, and as soon as I entered the corridor, everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at me. Yes, there was a silly giggle on the faces of the students. Hey, Perkosrak, do you see problems with the toilet? So you have that name, right? Do you like gas attacks? What will you call your children? These idiotic phrases accompanied every step until I reached my class. The teacher, meeting me, immediately apologized for the tactlessness, but her apology was just a formality, especially since I now understood it myself. I hated my name with all my heart. As time passed, the taunts became fewer, but they did not disappear. The hardest part was going through it alone, and no one was friends with me. I became a girl from the category of shame, so communication with me is contraindicated. Every day I became more and more depressed, came home, argued with my father, locked myself in my room, and generally wished I had never been born. My mother had promised to help, but so far I hadn't seen any action, which made it even more insulting. I'm dropping out of school, I told my parents over dinner one night. What? My father protested. You can't. You have to learn. I didn't stay silent this time either. We had another long, intense conversation about family traditions, respect for elders, and condescension. I reminded my father that I needed clemency now more than any of them because my life was collapsing. It's been a year and I still don't have a single girlfriend. I go to school like a loner. I don't walk in the park. I don't have fun at birthday parties. I don't visit my classmates. I don't participate in school life. I'm just a shadow. Because every time I drew attention to myself for a second, the class would throw jokes at me. After the conversation, I went to my room. Mom and Dad had a terrible fight. A week later, my grandfather came to visit us. I loved it. I loved it very much. But I couldn't accept his decision. He asked from the doorway what had happened in our family. Father smilingly pretended that everything was fine and the old man had nothing to worry about. My grandfather just shook his head, sat down in a chair, and called me. I hear you have a problem with your name. And now tell me, my dear granddaughter, how much do you care about all this? Said the grandfather. My parents sat down on the sofa next to us, and I shared all of my feelings with my grandfather and explained that I didn't want to hurt him and I couldn't live like this either. And then my grandfather apologized. My parents' eyes widened in surprise. My grandfather said that my name means a lot to him and our family traditions remain a priority. But if his first granddaughter is unhappy because of this, then we can revise our views in accordance with modern views. I squeaked with happiness. Your happiness is more important to me than tradition, my grandfather said. I squeaked with happiness, and all it turns out was just to talk to my grandfather. The next day we went and changed my name to the one I had chosen for myself, Rena. Of course, I also had to change my school, but all the better. I started a new life with a clean slate. So don't be afraid to change your life.